There we go. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game from scratch, live on Twitch. We, of course, do not use any engines or libraries. We write everything from scratch so that we can have one full path through an entire game. So we've seen at literally all the code, from the thing that puts the pixels on the screen all the way up to high-level stuff like AI. We've tried to basically say we're going to cover every last bit of it. And so right now what we're doing is we're kind of wrapping up some stuff that we did. We're at a point where we need to kind of decide what sort of things we're going to push into. So, you know, what we're probably going to do on today is do some sort of remaining issues, and then maybe try to think about what the next big step is that we want to make. Because what we've been trying to do is basically build out essentially a prototype functional version of a game engine that has all of the pieces in it so that we can see how they all fit together, so that we can start to make sort of final implementations of individual pieces as necessary. And this is a very flexible process. Obviously, we've done some parts that may be totally what we end up shipping. Like, we've done some parts that maybe are just fine. We've done other parts where we've sort of said, okay, yeah, this is kind of a bad version or a half-baked algorithm, but we know that it does the things that we need it to do, so later we can come back and do a good industrial strength piece of code here and be done with it, right? And so our goal in this pass through things, because we need something to start with, is to get a sort of a version of everything in the game that we want happening, everything that we think the engine needs to do, so that we can start writing the game. And if we need to add things later, that's always fine too. And if we need to build out pieces of the engine that end up needing to be better or more complicated than what we thought, that's all fine, and that's all totally par for the course. But what I wanted to do first was make sure, of course, that we at least have one pass through, because it's very important to be able to see how things work by experimentation and exploration before you try to go spend a lot of time building robust code for any individual purpose. For example, with the renderer, we want to get to a point where we know how we want to use the renderer before we would actually write an industrial strength renderer, because otherwise we would run the risk of writing a renderer that doesn't do the things that we need to do or doesn't do them quickly. So if we know what those things are, right, ahead of time, we know how the interface looks, we know how everything should flow through there, that just puts us in a much better position to succeed. And the same is true for everything else. The collision detector is the same way. We've kind of been working on what needs to happen there and how that needs to work. Pathfinding, things like that we're going to probably tackle in the future. Those are the same kinds of things. We need to know what our needs are and how our code wants to use things like pathfinding before we would want to go and write some really nice system that does fancy stuff, right? So that's what we're doing today, is we're sort of continuing down that road. And so we don't have any specific bullet point item, but we've got some things that we can take a look at. So that's kind of what we were going to do. All right, so let's take a look. If you are coding along at home, today is day 70, which means you will want to, if you pre-ordered the game, you should have got a link in your email, and that link should allow you to download a zip file which has zips inside it. It's like a Matryoshka doll or whatever they call them, one of those little nesting dolls. You can open up that zip file and there will be a zip for day 69, which is yesterday. If you unzip that into a directory, you'll be starting off with the exact same code that I'm starting off with now. And so if you want to follow along at home, that's the way to do it. All right, so I wanted to say something at the outset today. I don't know, maybe this will be something that we do today, because it's not really something that necessarily I would be concerned about right now, but I thought of it, and I thought that it might be a neat thing to just kind of show for you know, because it's a programming thing. Let's put it that way. So basically, you know, we were talking yesterday and we implemented some stuff about a collision rules list, right? It was a list where I could add rules to it, and it would allow people to either collide or not collide based on the rules, right? And so one of the things we did was, like, you know, when something hits something else, you can tell it to keep going. And the reason we did that was we wanted to have projectiles like that, that little test projectile that I added the other day, to be able to go through that guy, but still have the event recorded. So we wanted him to be able to recognize the fact that it hit our little torso monstar there. We wanted to be able to respond to that as a collision event, but we didn't actually want the collision system to do anything about it. We wanted to let it, let the projectile sail through, so we added that. But then we also wanted to know, don't keep giving us notifications about the fact that these two guys are touching, because we don't care. We only want to know when it starts, and so we wanted a system for adding rules. So what we did is we made a little hash table that you could add things into, and we said, all right, when two objects touch each other, if the response to that collision says, I don't want to hear about this anymore, it just can add a rule to that table, and then it will never get that response anymore. Now, we don't know if that's actually a good way to handle this. It was just sort of something that I thought of, and I was like, let's try it that way. And so we made that little hash table. But we did have a thing that I mentioned, which was I was like, I'm not sure how we pull things out of this hash table, right? I'm not sure how we clear this hash table effectively, because there was a very specific point, which was basically, we'll go ahead and jump to it, which was that, for example, with things like the sword, our sword, quote unquote, that you throw there, when it starts traveling, we want to say, okay, it's got a collision rule, it can't collide with the hero at all, and when it hits the monstar, we want it to just go ahead and do that once, so on collision, we'll add a rule for that. Obviously, that's not going to work if we do that every time the sword is thrown, because we keep adding more and more rules, and every time it went through a different monstar, there'd be a new rule, and we just proliferate the number of rules. We just have thousands of rules as the player played the game. So there needed to be a time when the rules are removed. So we had this clear collision rules thing, but the problem was, in order to clear the collision rules for a particular entity, there was no good way to find where those rules existed in the hash table, because the hash table was essentially a dual lookup hash table where you pass two indices. The entity, in any collision, there's two entities, entity A, entity B. And the way we made the hash table work is we just looked it up on entity A, right? So if the entity that you happen to be clearing always showed up as entity A, well, that would work fine. But if sometimes it shows up at entity B, there'd be no way to use the hash table to quickly find those entries and remove them. And that's a problem, right? So I said, well, we need, and in fact there's a to-do here, need to make a better data structure that allows removal of collision rules without searching the entire table. I was thinking about it afterwards when I was walking to work, and I realized there actually was a really obvious solution we could have used here. We could have made a trade and still used exactly the same hash table, but had direct removal of entries, right? Sorry, I'm still a little thick today. It's also allergy season here. Spring has come very early to Seattle. It's been extremely sunny. Normally we have a rainy season, and we didn't really. It's been really sunny and nice in Seattle, which is good in some sense, but it also means I think that the trees are pollinating me, which never goes well. Anyway, so what I was thinking is we could have made a trade-off that would have made that work, and I wanted to talk about it, and maybe we'll implement it. I don't know. But basically, here we go. Let's say here we are on day 70. So we've got a hash table, right? Hash, 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 hash. And the problem is, however we compute the hash key, right? So we've got incoming, we've got an index A and an index B, right? And however we insert this into this table, we're going to have a problem if we want to be able to clear all of the entries that involve some entity E. Because we don't know how to compute the hash key just from E. And it doesn't matter what rule we pick, right? If we only inserted them using A, then if E happens to show up in the B key, we can't find it, right, without searching. But if we base the insertion off B, the same would be true of A. If we base it off the combination of A and B, then we can't find it at all. It doesn't matter if it's A or B, we can't find it, because when we look up on E, we don't know how to produce a combined hash key from that, right? So the question is, given a hash table that's supposed to store things that you look up on A and B, how do you make it so that we can just look up on one of them and without it being too onerous, allow removal, right? How do we do it? So there's actually a couple different ways that we can do it, and I mentioned one of them, and I want to mention the other one, which is kind of amusing. The reason it's kind of amusing is because it would work without a hand-coded structure, right? So basically, if you think about it, we've got this hash table, right? And in the hash table, we've got an external chain, right? And so we've got basically, this is just a pointer. These are pointers in here. They're not actual entries. And these are the actual entries. So these store like A, B, you know, another A and B, whatever. I guess we should call this C and D, right? And so, you know, somewhere else down here, I may have something which was a rule that was like C and A. And so that's the problem there. The problem is that the A shows up secondarily. So if I was going to look, even if I do it off of A, I'm going to find this one. I'm not going to find that one, but I should have removed them both, right? So another option that we could do is we could add 2 more pointers, right, to these, which are basically ways of chaining off of the elements, right? We could put another chain through here, which is that every one of these guys also has 2 pointers on them, right? And those pointers point to, for each of the slots, like a linked list through the hash table, right? So basically, on the C, you know, we come through here, it would point to this guy. On the A, it would point to this guy or whatever, right? So that you could go through them and remove them. So we'd store with each entity a pointer into the hash table so that to the first thing that had them, or we would just look up in the hash table some way, I don't know, right? But you see that this gets pretty messy because we have to add 2 pointers to everything, and when we get there, how do we remove it? Because let's say we end up with this guy. If we point to this guy, we don't actually know which hatch slot he was in. So removing it, we don't know how to fix up this pointer because we can't get back, right? So it's kind of ugly and confusing. And it's like, what do you do, right? So there's another option, and I just wanted to point it out because it's kind of interesting how it works. And one of the things I want to show on the stream, again, and that's why I've been writing all the data structures by hand, for example, is I want to show how to write data structures. Because oftentimes, if you are facile, if you don't, you know, if your answer to how you store stuff is not always just open up the standard template library and grab something, if you actually code them by hand, a lot of options open up to you. If you have that kind of practice and that facility with data structures, it means you can make purpose-built stuff in cases where you need it, right? And so in this case, we have another way of thinking about it. But when you actually think about it too, you'll also, this is not a good demonstration of reasons to code things by hand, because this is the actual method that I thought of is something that would work even if you were using a off-the-shelf component to store them. I'm pretty sure anyway. I don't actually know. But I assume you could combine, yeah, you could. You could combine like an STL map and an STL list to do this, let's say. So what I realized was, well, you know, if we were going to spend some extra storage, like 2 extra pointers, right? And we do 2 extra pointers and then still get a system where we don't even know how it would work, right? 2 extra pointers on a 64-bit system is like 16 bytes, right? Because each one is 8 bytes. Each pointer is 8 bytes. So that's pretty expensive, right? Considering the fact that these were 2 uints, so actually there was only 8 bytes here, and then the bool, you know, was another 4 bytes or whatever, but we could have made that smaller if we wanted to. We could even probably snuggle it in some way by using the high bit or some weird stuff like this. So these were actually pretty small, these things. And then there was an 8-byte pointer to the next field, was actually, you know, pretty big. So adding this, though, would not quite double the size, but it would make the size quite considerably more. So the question is, if we were going to go that big, if we were going to look at 2x sized things, which is what you'd have to do if you were going to start to do sort of that chaining version, is there something else you could do that would be much easier and work more in a more straightforward fashion? And the answer is yes, I think there is. So when we insert A and B, and we know that we want to be able to search for E, in our hash table, what we could do is we could say, whenever we do an insertion, instead of inserting just on a key, like what we're doing now, that we're doing just based on A or on something else like that, insert it based on A. So insert it, this, in a position based on A. So this would be the A's hash slot, right? So here is the AB that we insert, right? So that goes in there. Then insert it on B as well. So if this is where B goes, B collision rules go, right? We also insert it here, right? And we insert it the other way around if we want to as well, right? So we just insert the two versions. We insert AB and we insert BA, right? Now, if we want to remove something entity E, we can look up on entity E, and we know that no matter whether it was in this position or this position, we know that we will find, like let's say we come and we get B, which before would have failed. We know that we will find one of the two in the pair when we look. When we find that one, we now have the information necessary to remove the other one, because this gives us the A that we didn't have. So we can then do the removal by calling the exact same routine on the pair flipped the other way round, right? So the algorithm for doing this removal then becomes pretty straightforward. We do one pass on the removal of AB. That will push, remember, all the things we remove go onto the free list, right? Here's the free list. That will put the things on the free list, right? So BA gets inserted onto the free list. And here's where the free list was before, and BA goes on here, right? All we have to do now is basically grab a pointer to that free list, remember before we do that pass, remember the top of the free list beforehand, whatever it was. So this was the previous top of the free list. We just loop through from there until we get to the top of the free list. We loop through and call remove on the reverse of each of these things. Problem solved. Now we have direct removal from our hash table, right? It works. In all the cases, there's nothing weird there, and we don't actually have to write a different routine, right? It's totally fine. So that's kind of interesting, and it's a neat way to do this. So I mean, that might be the best way to do it. I don't know, right? And again, there's a cost to it. It doubles the entry count to our hash table, right? So if this thing was really big, then that would probably be a bad solution, right? Like if we were concerned about the storage cost for this hash table, that wouldn't be good. We don't really know if we're concerned about that yet, so it's a little premature to even say one way or the other. I suspect we probably will never be concerned about it, because compared to our art asset size, I suspect this probably will be pretty tiny. But we now know that for a 2x size cost, we could totally make that happen, right? And then we wouldn't have to bother sorting the indices when we look them up either. We'd just look up however they came in, because we know we'd always find the rule no matter which order we look things up, because they're both in there, right? So I thought I'd point that out because it was just kind of neat. And I'll put a note in here as in case, so if we do decide that we want to do that eventually, we can. Say, one way to make removal easy would be to always add both orders of the pairs of storage indices to the hash table, so no matter which position the entity is in, you can always find it. Then, when you do your first pass through for removal, you just remember the original top of the free list, and when you're done, do a pass through that list, pass through all the new things on the free list, and remove the reverse of those pairs. So there you go. So I was kind of happy with that, and I was like, I should probably talk about that in the stream because it's kind of fun. All right. So let's take a look here. Somebody reported a bug that was, I'm very glad they caught, because this would be one that, you know, I don't even know, it might never have bit us, but if it had bit us, we would have been very grumpy because it would have taken a long time to find, because we just wouldn't have thought to look here for a while probably. So in our add radius 2, remember, which I basically wrote to enlarge a rectangle, these are wrong, right? It's supposed to be that we add the width and the height and subtract the width and the height respectively, but I had totally typed them in wrong, total typo. And so that would never have caused us any problems with the way we were using it now, because we were passing the same value for W and H. But if we ended up in a case eventually where we weren't doing that, right, where we were passing different values for W and H, it would have stopped working properly, and we would have been like, what is happening, right? So thankfully, someone who had been working along with the videos noticed. They were like, wait, is that right? And I'm like, nope, that is not right. So again, thank you to everyone who actually does go and work through the code. It's really awesome to have the help. Again, like it's hard. Those are mistakes that, you know, that's a mistake I would make just day-to-day programming even, right? Sometimes you make typos. But I definitely even make them at a higher rate on the stream too, because my concentration is split between the explanation and the code. And so it really is helpful when people point out stuff like that, because it's not that interesting usually to show how you find a bug like that, right? It's like, oh, it was just a typo, and right? And so, you know, it does save us time on the stream if people can point out like, oh, hey, you know, you made a typo here. It's like, that's probably better than watching me debug it most of the time, because, you know, like I said, I try to show debugging on the stream for any hard problems. Obviously, it's good. And so I always do all the debugging myself, which is how I think it should go. But it is helpful to have people write in and catch those things, I think, because, you know, we don't need to hunt down every typo on the stream. All right. That's it for my to-do notes. I had a little post-it to remind myself of those two things. So that's it for that. So now we got to talk about a couple things. First of all, we got to talk about where we're at now. We've got a couple things to do. So, you know, one of the obvious things that we need to fix is sorting. We're not sorting, so we draw just in whatever entity order, which allows this, you know, this guy goes behind those trees, which is nonsensical. I've been kind of putting that off just because I think that's just best to go in the render. I mean, it's not really causing us any consternation. It's annoying me and probably people on the stream. But it's not really impeding our ability to code forward. So I'm not going to do that till we get to the render, because the render is going to have to do that. And we might as well just put that in the right place instead of hacking it in now for no apparent reason, right? So when we're actually going through and working on the renderer, we'll just do that. And that won't be too long anyway. So there's that. So I'm going to continue to put that off. The other thing that we need to do is give our Monstar some behavior, and also figure out what we want to do when like a Monstar dies, for example. Those sorts of things. So that's on the table. We also have to start thinking about a couple things, like, so how we're going to, so I added that collision rule stuff, and I said this might be interesting because you can add those rules. We're going to need something a little fancier to, you know, in the collision detection department, and I'm wondering if maybe we should do, even though, you know, the time might not be right to do the full collision detector, I'm wondering if we need to just even go a little further on that, because here's another thing that I was thinking about. So with our collision rules, it was an interesting thing, and I kind of like the fact that we implemented it. We may use it. It may be a good thing. But I wonder if we're going to maybe have to lean more heavily on some kind of a system that does have a little bit more of a geometric interpretation, because one of the things I was thinking about is, let's say we want to make a pressure plate. to step on, right? One way to do that would be to make the pressure plate entity, we step on it, right? And, you know, it opens a door, like it removes some entities or something, right? So I can walk through a door. In fact, maybe that's what we should make. The problem with that pressure plate is that I need to add a collision rule so that I don't keep getting called back about the fact that I stepped on the pressure plate potentially. Like maybe I only want to get notified once that I stepped on it. Well, obviously we can use a collision rule for that. It would work fine. But when do you remove the collision rule? Collision rules are really only effective if there's a defined time, like with this sword thing that I was talking about, a defined time window where they operate in so that they can get removed. Because if they never got removed, like with a pressure plate, I step on it, how do I know when to remove that collision rule, right? And I guess what you could say is, well, when you step off the pressure plate, we could remove the collision rule, but I don't know how to know when we would step off the pressure plate if our whole definition of doing collision testing is based on these rules. Now, maybe what we could say is, well, okay, we have two ways of testing things in the collision detector, which is something we would have anyway, which is, are two things overlapping currently? And then there's the whether things go into or out of stuff. But if we go that route and that has to work properly, then we might as well maybe just use that for most of the things. So we have entry and exit, ideas of collision. Do we even need the rules anymore at that point? Or can we just use those? And the answer is, well, I don't know. Maybe we still want the rules for extra robustness, because in the case of where things are kind of numerically fiddly, maybe we don't want to accidentally record multiple hits. I don't know. But those are just the kind of things I was thinking about. And so I don't know if maybe we want to go back through the collision detection one more time, clean those things up, and maybe say, all right, let's get a real notion of entry and exit in here, which we probably want to have anyway, and maybe start using that for some of the things. I don't know. So those have been the kind of things that are on my mind right now, and I'm not sure which ones we should do. I guess maybe just for a little bit of a change of pace, maybe let's go do pathfinding or something, and then we'll come back and maybe we'll do some collision detection after that. I don't know. We can think about that. It's just something to think about. So for example, like one thing that we could do is we could go ahead and implement having the familiar be able to get through a more complicated having the familiar be able to get to us even through a more complicated sort of arrangement of trees, right? So we could make a more complicated arrangement, or I could just do this sort of a thing, and then we could see that it could find its way around, right? So that's a pretty difficult problem. It might take us a while. So that might be a good thing for us to do too, right? So I'm just thinking aloud here because we're getting to the point where we need to sort of pick a new major thing to do. All right. So beyond all of that, obviously, is also animation. That's the last thing that we definitely need to do, and that would be like getting this guy to hop. I've kind of been all the time I've been like, oh, we should go do animation next, we should do animation next, but I never actually quite get to it. We keep deciding that there's something else we might want to do ahead of time, and so I don't know. That's the other thing that we could go tackle, and that's going to be kind of a whole separate branch as well. I should probably be listing these things out, right? So let's go ahead and take a little piece of handmade.h here. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, put a to-do up here. So let's see. We want to do animation, right? So we want to do our animation. I guess what I would say is animation should probably lead into rendering, because animation will motivate our renderer quite a bit. That would include particle systems probably as well, systems, and skeletal animation, basically what we want here. So this is kind of our graphical effects sort of a stuff that we got to do. So we'd want to put in some of that, and then that will lead directly into rendering. So we know that these two come in this order because we'd want to have animation going first so that we have a bunch of motivation to get our rendering doing the things that we need to do. So for example, when we add skeletal animation in there, we're going to want to rotate pieces of the guy. And we're not going to be able to do that, right? Because our bitmap drawing code right now doesn't support that. And so that's going to be like, animation is going to be this nice thing where there's all these requirements we generate, and then that's going to lead nicely into the render. We're like, okay, we know we need scaling, we know we need rotation, and then we know what we have to build for the renderer. So I think we probably want to put animation off until basically the last thing we do before the renderer, and the renderer probably is the last thing we do before we start actual coding. So the game goes here, right? Is what I would say. So the game, I would say we probably also want to push off the entity system until then. Because the entity system is going to come up concurrent with the game. And so I would say that, like, really the only stuff we need about the entity system right now is all the scalability stuff and how that sort of goes. And so probably what we'll do is we'll leave our piggy entity right now, our giant entity thing that doesn't really do anything in terms of being smart about anything. We'll just leave that. And then, so basically, the entity system will be what we do this, the game, when we start doing the game, world generation and the entity system will kind of come up together as we build that game. And those will be components that, are evolving continuously throughout that time, right? Now, for world generation, we do need one thing up here before we do any of this stuff, which is like rudimentary world gen. So basically, no quality, just what sorts of things we do. And so right now we have essentially no ability to generate worlds whatsoever. We just make a bunch of connected rooms. So what we would want to do here is a rudimentary world gen that basically did what we need to do to actually make real world stuff. So if we look out here, right? We don't have any ground cover. The trees are all in a weird line. Like, they're like wall rooms, it doesn't make any sense. We don't have any notion of like where stuff is or any of that stuff. So we'd want to make a screen that looked sort of like the game should look, with trees and rocks placed in reasonable, not like using good algorithms, but just some trees, some rocks, some grass down there. So it was like a full looking screen. So we'd know roughly what we have to do to make that happen, right? So that we want that so that we at least know how that's going to work roughly. So that when we do world generation, what we're focusing on here is just going to be, okay, in this particular situation, world generation, we're just focusing on how do we make algorithms that generate the kinds of worlds that we want, and that'll come up with the entity system, but not how do we actually write the code to support world gen, right? So we probably want to do that here, right? And that'll do stuff like placement of background things, connectivity, probably, just, non-overlapping, things like that. Just some basic stuff so we know what has to happen so that we make sure that our structures of things support the kinds of queries that we need. Okay. So I already said we needed some AI stuff here, right? So we need like pathfinding. And then we, I guess, need like AI storage, for lack of a better term. But, for things that are supposed to have some agency in the world, we're going to need some notion of what it is that they're trying to do at any given time, right? And those might be variably sized. Like if a guy has some goals he's trying to accomplish or whatever standard sorts of things, you might see in a gamey AI, we probably want to figure out, do we have a plan for that? Is there anything we need to plan for that? Or is it just, hey, there's a linked list somewhere or whatever? Like, is there anything special we have to do to make that happen? Just make sure that there isn't anything strange and weird there that we got to deal with. Yeah. So that all looks good. Collision detection. We've sort of got the collision detection problem, which is, hey, on collision detection, do we need entry, exit? right? What about what's the plan for robustness, so we don't get stuck in things, that sort of stuff, and I guess shape definition. We don't know exactly how we want to do that, so that's something. Let's think about what else we got here. It's nice to have this list so we can basically kind of look at all the things that we need to do. We've got sim stuff. Oh, I guess one thing we could do is implement multiple sim regions per frame, right? So basically, like, get a rudimentary thing going where we've got these sim regions now that sim multiple things, and in that would be entity, per entity clocking, right? So we know when things have been updated and how far they need to get updated for each individual step, and maybe sim region merging for multiple players, right? So if you imagine two players are playing and they're at different places in the world and they come close together, and we want to simulate them in one region maybe. So, I don't know, stuff like that. It's pretty easy for us to merge those things. Yeah, I'm not sure. What else do we got here? Yeah. What am I forgetting? What am I forgetting? Let's think. If I were playing this game, yeah, I just kind of... I guess we have one sort of thing, which is metagame save game, right? Which is basically just saying, like, okay, we need some story about, do we even allow save games? Do we allow save games? Probably yes, right? Just not, just only for pausing, basically. So since this game is supposed to be, roguelike, right? We don't want the user to be able to actually save their game volitionally, but we may want them to be able to, like, close the game in the middle of playing and then come back later and continue. So, we might want that, or crash recovery as well, right? Like if the game crashed, because remember, even if we do a perfect job and have no crash bugs in the game when we ship it, there's always the graphics driver to go ahead and help you out and crash anyway. So it's usually nice, if you can, to build something into the game where if it crashes, because even if it's, like I said, there is no way to ensure a Windows game, for example, won't crash. Because even if you're perfect, somehow you've made a perfect program, someone else will just go ahead and crash for you. So it's nice if we can maybe save the game periodically in some nice way. So like continuous save for crash recovery would be a nice feature to have, because it means that, especially if we want to scale the game up to 20 hours of playtime, 40 hours of playtime, if we do weird stuff like allowing you to generate huge worlds that take a really long time to play, it would be nice for the person to know that 30 hours in, the only way they can lose all that work is if they're bad at the game and die, and not because the graphics driver crashed, right? So it would be nice if they could load up and only be like one room back from where they were, or, a couple, 30 seconds or a minute back from where they were. Just something that allows that would kind of be nice, right? So thinking about how we want to do, persistent unlocks, etc., right? Thinking about how we want this structure to work, that's something that we probably want in the game for sure. And so just, it's not anything magical, but it would just be nice to kind of go through and go, let's think about how we're going to handle this. Because we do have some kind of nasty elements of that. Like, our save games might be huge, right? Because if we generate the whole world every time, and that world may be fairly expensive to generate, and the user may be able to modify large amounts of things in the world, we do have some things, we may have to do some creative stuff there. It may not be obvious how to make all that work well, right? At the very least, even if we have a giant save file, like, hey, for a giant world, the save game file is 60 megabytes or whatever, right? Even if we do that, we, and say that's just the way it is, so forget cloud saves, right? The save game file on the local machine for saving that play session, even if we do that, we wouldn't be able to save continuously 60 megabytes of data. That's too much traffic probably to not impact the frame rate at all. So what we'd want to do is maybe only save incrementally or something. Like we'd want to have some smart stuff that did like, okay, we only update the part of the save game we actually need to update or something like this, right? And so I don't know. So that's one way to think about it. And the other thing is, we probably want to split them apart because if we have to have giant save files to support huge modifiable worlds or something like that, then we certainly don't want the persistent stuff to be part of that because we would want the persistent stuff like unlocks to be part of a cloud save system, which isn't going to want to upload 60 megabytes every time, right? So we'd want to split that off so that your Steam account or something, whatever, can sync your persistent part at the very least, because we know we could make that small because the number of like unlocks or whatever isn't going to be 60 megabytes. That's going to be 200K or something at worst case, right? So yeah. So we got most of the stuff here. Let's see, got the metagame. We've got we've got AI. Rudimentary Monstar behavior example. All right. You know what else we got? Z. So we want to clean up things by using vector 3. We want to figure out how you go up and down, and how is this rendered, right? Like how do we show going into something, or going up it? And it might be interesting too to ask people on the stream, people who've played a lot of games. It might be interesting to ask too, what are good examples of games, 2D games, where you can go up and down stuff and it looks good to do it? Like I think about Binding of Isaac or something, you can't ever really go up, so they never have to deal with the fact that you walk upstairs and then switch to another level or something. And you can't really go down either, because when you go down something, it just shows this little like jump up and go animation and then it just cuts. So they never really show you going down into something either. And so I don't know, like render-wise, what we want to show in terms of somebody walking up a stairs or something. Like what do we want to do? Obviously, we can do something real cheesy where you just touch the stairs and instantly you're on the next screen or something. But is there some better some better way of animating that looks nicer or something? What do we want to think of? Is there a game that did it particularly well that we should be looking to for guidance? That sort of thing. So there's that. So yeah, we want to kind of get our Z situation. That's not particularly hard, but it is something we should go through and do. Trying to think. What else we got here? Architecture exploration is here. And then this is, production, basically. What do you guys think? Am I forgetting stuff? Am I forgetting stuff? And I don't know. I would say out of these things, some of them are big, some of them are small. I would basically say that's a pretty rough one. I'm not sure how we're going to do it. That's pretty tough. I would say, yeah, I would say this one's probably going to be a pretty big one. These are probably not, except maybe this one. We'll see. Yeah. So I would say we've got some hard work to do here. Some of this is pretty easy, some of it's not. If anyone, I should check the stream. Audio. Yeah, somebody said audio. So got sound effect triggers, ambient sounds, and music, I guess, are things we should sort of get in there. Audio's usually pretty trivial. It's just not that hard, especially not in a game like this one, where let's be honest, we don't have a huge budget for this game, so we don't need to do something like make a huge studio editing system where people can dial all kinds of crazy dials and have weird effects and stuff. It's like, we're gonna have the money for basically buying sound effects that play when the game needs them to play, and music that plays, and ambient sounds like, oh, if there's running water, we play the running water, right? We're not gonna have the ability to have like a sound guy be sitting there doing all kinds of soundscaping stuff where it needs to happen. So we're probably not going to have that much work to do on audio. We'll support the basics, and then we'll be able to kind of put the assets in, but there's not going to probably be a whole lot more than that. Although I guess we could play around with some of it later. There's always places to add stuff, but yeah, we need the basic audio. What else we got? I should take a look at the stream here and see if anyone else has ideas. Doesn't look like anyone else mentioning anything in particular on there. So we go through it one more time and make sure we've got everything. Once we have the metagame, we can go, I guess, so one thing, so we start up, we've got the metagame. There's sort of, I guess there's sort of a, so, in the metagame, I guess there's one other thing we might think about. So there's kind of the concept of, how do you enter a save slot or whatever? Like, there's kind of this concept when you start playing, do I want to have multiple versions of my, like these persistent unlocks and stuff, right? What if I want more than one version of those persistent unlocks? The simplest example being, if I'm playing on the same game, as Garlando Bloom, because we are sharing a computer, like it's the living room computer or something, and he and I are like both want to play this game, and we're like, let's do this, but he wants to keep his save game separate from mine so that he can unlock stuff separately from me or whatever, right? And we can each play the game without having to play the other person's save file. So if we go in there and do that, what is that the implications for that in the game? How do we make sure we keep those separate, and what's the way that they get picked? Because maybe we want that to all work in game, so there's not like a menu. It's just kind of like, you have your character, then the first thing you do is move to that you can imagine like a spatial version where you like walk down there's 3 different stairs or something, and you go down the one that's the save slot that you wanted to play on. If we want to do something like that, there has to kind of be this notion of multiple worldy things where it's like we're in a world that isn't really a real world. It's a world that for picking worlds, and then we picked one and now we have that world, right? There's this kind of thing that goes on there that creates complexity in the code. And so we probably, before we go any further too, would want that to work properly, right? So we'll get that in there as well. Let's see. Anything else? Any in-game UI needed? Hopefully not. I hate in-game UI, so I'm hoping that we won't have any in-game UI. That's my hope. I mean, we may float a few things. I guess that's one thing we could do, which is like just a floating thing for. I'm hoping we don't have any. I guess that's what I'd say. I'm hoping that we don't have any of that, so I'm just going to see if we can get away without it. Logging should be on the list. So I guess, yeah, debugging, right? Debug code should be on the list. So yeah, logging, diagramming, switches, sliders, that sort of thing, right? Some kind of stuff for getting debugging working. Let's see. Can we please do GUI? So I guess we'll do a little GUI here. We'll do a little GUI, but only a little, because games with GUI I don't really like. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like we'll do, if you want to do handmade, some point you do handmade, like Roller Coaster Tycoon, or one of those old games that had like tons of windows that were, it was like, it looks like some kind of an app, right? That's where you'd kind of want to do the GUI coding, but so we'll see. But yeah, maps is a good point. Maps is a good one. I'm not sure how we want to do maps. I wonder if we could, yeah, maps is interesting. Maps is very interesting. Yeah, let's go ahead and add that. Map display. Magnets, how they work. So basically, yeah, map display, I thought a little bit about that, and that actually may be a technological problem. Meaning maybe we really do kind of want to think about that a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and put that underneath rudimentary world gen, like so. Because I do have some thoughts about that. And so, yeah, let's think about that. Will you be carrying multiple items? So, yeah, I've got ideas about how I want to do that. Let's put it that way. So I think we can get away with very little UI in the game, if none at all. But yeah, we'll get to that part later. I don't think map is a good point, and map is a thing. That's Q&A time. I think we're done mostly with this. I think this is a pretty good list. Yeah. So let's sort. Let's, I started a little late, so let's just take a couple minutes and let's sort this. Because we're starting fresh next week, obviously. We'll be starting Monday. Time for a new topic. Let's think about what we want to do here. So I would say that like Z and multiple sim regions is kind of an example of cleaning up sort of stuff. So I think I might say let's do this stuff. Let's do this stuff next week, maybe. Try to do some of this because we're going to take the week off the following, the first week of March. I said we'd take off, give people a chance to catch up and stuff. I'm going to be traveling that week, so it'll be easy. That'll be best for everyone because people have been asking for a week off. They'll get a week off. I won't have to try and figure out how to stream from locations where the internet might be even less likely to get to Twitch than it is here. So that might be a good one. So maybe we start with these next week because we don't want to start something big next week, be right in the middle of it, and then take a week off. That seems bad. So maybe we stick with things that are just stuff we've already done that we just need to clean up, get them off the list, get them done, right? So maybe we break it up. We try to do that. And then, if we break in the middle of that and for a week, it doesn't matter because these are things we've already mostly done, so we're just kind of like updating them, and that'd be fine, right? Then if we take a look at this stuff, I guess I would say metagame and save game maybe would be a good thing to think about. They kind of go together with rudimentary world gen, like, right, like making worlds and how we persist things. That's kind of, to me, those kind of go together, right? Audio is just totally a separate thing, as is debug code. These are totally separate. Entirely separate. So maybe we put maybe we put these up here and like that. Maybe we do debug code. I don't know if I really care about doing debug code that early on. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. Yeah. All right. And then we would sort of do it in this order. This would be the order. I don't know what you guys think about this. So basically we do this stuff, which I don't think will be too much work, pretty straightforward. This would be creating all new code, which is just stuff that allows us to debug our stuff more easily. This would sort of be finishing up that collision detection code. I wonder, so I feel like that's probably a little bit more of a cleanup thing too. So maybe let's do it in this order, right? So here's our cleanup stuff, right? And maybe maybe we do that first, because I don't like leaving it broken, and we sort of haven't really finished that stuff. So maybe we just kind of do one more pass on the collision detection, get that stuff feeling good, right? Then we do this stuff. We do this stuff. Yeah, I like the way this is developing. Let's move AI down to here, so that kind of dovetails into the animation system. And well, okay, yeah, and AI and the world gen kind of go together too, because the pathfinding may have to kind of understand some of those things. All right, so that's looking pretty reasonable. Yeah, I like that. That looks like a pretty good hit list. I feel like by the time that we got through all of this stuff, we would basically have what amounts to a completely playable engine thing. You know, that's pretty decent, actually. And that certain components are not industrial strength, but we'd be in perfect position to go ahead and start doing exactly that, which is going through and making things industrial strength. So we'd start in on the renderer, which is the only real huge one, and then we could actually go through and do, you know, do it for reals. So that seems pretty good. I could see that being good. All right, so I'm happy with that. Let's go ahead and go to the Q&A. I don't know if there'll be much Q&A today because of the fact that basically what we did is sort of do our planning. But you know, I can't predict whether there'll be Q&A or not. So I'll go ahead and hit the little QA button. There it is. Please prefix your questions with Q: so I can see them. And please, well, you know what? I don't even care. Just ask whatever questions you want today. But I reserve the right to say that something is a pre-stream question and to ask it on pre-stream instead. Yeah, let's go ahead and leave that up there. Isn't doing this list thinking too far ahead or thinking too far according to your compression-oriented programming? You look ahead with this table for weeks ahead. No, because I often do stuff like this. I don't feel like this really has anything to do with the programming, if that makes sense. This is just listing the things we know we would need to have, right? So this isn't a schedule. We don't have to stick to this in any way. But it's just like guidance. It's like, okay, what do we do? Like I was at a point today where I was like, I'm not sure what we do next. This is just a list we can come back to anytime we're at that point where we're like, okay, we finished thing X. We're pretty happy with where it is. We don't think we need to go any further on it right now. What do we do next? We can just pull something off the list, right? So we go back to the list and go, what else we got? Oh, right. We know we wanted to, you know, get Z handling. Let's go start looking at Z handling, right? And so definitely don't think of this list as something we have to do in order. At any time, you can go ahead and ignore this list entirely, right? It's just sitting there as sort of a brain dump where we're like, these are all the things that are gonna have to get done at some point, so that we just kind of don't forget them, right? And I just kind of wanted to get that out there. So yeah, so definitely don't think of this as something that has to be adhered to, and I pretty much can guarantee you that it won't be. Like, there'll be plenty of things in here where we're like, oh, we started working on collision detection and we noticed this thing, let's go do that or whatever. But just kind of was a nice little plan where I can say, okay, now I know all the major areas, so when we get to a point and we're not sure what we should do next, we just grab something and say, all right, let's do that. Because we've sort of said, oh yeah, we probably should do that at some point. In the get hash from storage index function, you do some bit twiddling to map hash value into hash index. Is there a reason that you didn't just compute hash index as hash index equals hash value mod array count? Yes. So mod is very expensive compared to and. So basically, a mod requires integer division, right? And integer division is slow compared to an and. An and is usually one of the fastest operations the CPU can do. It's rare that like an and takes really any time at all. And so for the most part, the reason to avoid mod is because you don't want, if the whole point of the thing that you're doing is to make accesses quick, you typically don't want to have a mod in there. Now, that said, really we don't know which one is the most appropriate for any given situation. So just to show the example that the person was talking about, they were saying this, right, hash bucket. Why are we doing an and instead of a mod? And so really we don't know, because it may be that using a non-power of 2 size is better for a particular circumstance, because if when you do this lookup, if this stuff isn't in the cache, then it's probably true that the mod cost is not expensive enough to matter, right? Because the memory fetching to get the hash table into memory, if it wasn't in the cache at the time, is going to dominate that runtime, right? And so really, this is just, I tend to write them as ands to begin with, just to make sure that I'm not relying on mod. But sometimes when we go back in there, we might decide that mod is fine, and that we would rather have the non-power of 2 size for some other reason. And so really the answer is just, it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off between complete flexibility of sizing versus the cost to the CPU to compute the hash bucket. And trade-offs like that are not something we really can make up front. We have to see how they run in practice on our target platforms and then decide. Chances are this will not really be an important part of the program anyway, and really you could probably use both, either one. Because chances are we just won't be dealing with collision rules enough to make them be an important part of the runtime cost of the system. But it's worth understanding those trade-offs anyway, because sometimes they are. Sometimes your hash tables are very important. So that's just something to think about. And that's why I tend to write them this way. And also because, obviously, I learned programming at a time when the cost was far more exaggerated than it is now. Obviously, when I started programming, the concept that you would do an integer divide ever was kind of ludicrous. Like, you never, ever, ever, ever wanted to do an integer divide. Integer divide was a disaster. Because in those days, memory accessing was a similar cost to doing an instruction. Memory wasn't the super slow thing compared to the processor that it is now. And so, you had these situations where doing a mod literally meant that, the code got 40 times slower or something, right? Because it was so expensive to do that divide or something. Whereas now, that's not necessarily the case, because things don't work that way. And so the trade-offs change, and again, the only really way to know is to have a good sense of what your target platforms are and actually test to see if you care. Right now, the familiar lags behind since it moves slower than the player. There may be many legitimate situations where the player and the familiar may be separated. Have you considered implementing a proportional integral derivative controller for its speed? Well, again, we're not trying to code a familiar at this point, right? We just wanted something in there so we could see what the architecture should look like. We don't need to make a good familiar, because that'll be for later on when we have the whole game running and we're implementing the familiars and how we want them to work. Proportional integral derivative controllers are interesting, except they do have some drawbacks, and so we'll probably use them for some things. I don't know about the integral part is usually not as interesting for games. Proportional derivative controllers are usually more fun because they have sort of a little more springy, unpredictable behavior that usually is a little more fun in games. So proportional derivative controller might be more likely than proportional integral derivative controller. Like the integral term we probably wouldn't use. But also for things that we want to have very predictable behavior, proportional integral derivative controllers actually probably also aren't what I would use for that. I would probably use sort of direct spline interpolation. So hard to say, but that's kind of down the road. My connection dropped. Could you briefly go over the solution for the collision table again? Actually, you can just watch it on YouTube. These get uploaded immediately after, so you can watch day 70 again and see my complete explanation. Do we have to do Z sorting? For a game like this, can't we just sort on the y-axis and do things to simulate climbing stairs, change the velocity as the character moves up something like stairs and what have you? So that's what I mean when I say Z sorting, though, is sorting on the y-axis. Obviously, once you sort on the y-axis, though, like once we do the sorting to handle the fact that, I should be behind these trees instead of in front of them, once we do that sort, it's free usually for us to also sort by Z correctly as well, because, when you're doing a sort, you can make the sort comparison be compound. It doesn't just have to sort on one thing. So we'll get Z sorting for free when we do the Y sorting as well, probably. So the problem isn't so much the sorting, though. The problem is what should happen when the guy goes up and down stairs. Like, what do we want it to look like, right? It's a presentation issue, not a code issue. I'm sure we'll be able to code whatever it is. We just have to think about what it should look like when he goes up and down the stairs. Like how does that work? Does he just kind of go up them a little and then it flips to the next one, or it's just what should it look like, And I'm not sure. I heard you talking about animation. See you write down a skeletal system. Do you have plans on importing from a pre-made program or making an animation program for the artist to use? So I don't know whether we'll just kind of make the animation be procedural mostly, which I think is probably what we'll do. But I noticed this thing. Where is it? Yeah. This thing looked kind of interesting. It was like a little skeletal animation thing that was pretty cheap. It was like $60, and there's a free version, so people would be able to do simple things in it without having to pay as well. So that seemed like a potentially reasonable tool to import from, because it could do skeletal animation authoring, and then we could load it, right? But I don't know that we'll actually use any authored animations. If we do, that's probably what I look at. That was the tool that came to mind because I saw that was released recently and looked like a low-cost thing that could output data files that we could use for the game. But I don't know that we actually will need that. It may be that all of our animation is always procedural. So I don't know. We'll see. For the list, Superfish. So Superfish, I have a text file on a computer which has all of my game design things that I want in the game, and Superfish is already on there. I added it when I tweeted about it the other day. So there will be a Superfish enemy, and I think what we'll try to do with the Superfish enemy, my thought about that was the Superfish enemy will be like a mimic, like in Dungeons and Dragons, like a chest that attacks you or whatever. It'll basically be like, it'll impersonate other things. And because that's basically, it's basically root certificated you. So it'll impersonate things and then turn into a monster when you try to use those things the way you normally would. That to me is Superfish. Asset loading management is missing from the list. You are correct. That is a good one. Thank you. Where's my handmade.h? There it is. That is a good one. So we totally should do that. How do we want to do that? So we probably want to do that. Probably want to do that in here. Asset streaming. Put that in there. Yeah. What 2D game can you think of that did good Z movement I personally always liked Prince of Persia when he climbed the steps at the end of the level. I don't know. That's why I was thinking, like, I can't think. I'll go watch some Prince of Persia videos. I don't know. None came to mind, really, actually. Prince of Persia is a little hard because Prince of Persia was not top down or isometric. So going up was much more logical to them because it was actually up on the screen, was actual up, right? So they had an easier time of it, where it's clearer, I think, to the player what's going on because there aren't three, axes, basically. Have I seen watchpeoplecode.com? Yeah, someone sent it to me. I thought it was kind of funny that it started like a month or so after we started doing Handmade Hero. And the things that they put on there, they've never put us on there, but we have way more viewers than anything that I saw on there. So I feel like we're being snubbed or something. I don't really feel like we're being snubbed. But it was kind of funny. I was like, well, all right, yeah, you could watch these people code, but we've got the real actions over here on Handmade Hero, my friends. We know where the stuff's at. What is your opinion on using existing code someone else wrote as a learning tool? Totally fine. I actually don't have any problem with using, I don't think there's anything wrong with using libraries or engines. That's just not the goal of this series, right? I feel like there was too much of the sort of, I'm not really sure how to program and I'm making a game in something going on. And so I thought it was important to have a counterpoint that was like, let's have something where we show how you actually can code everything. Because I feel like you want like both of those things. Especially because, I see a lot of games, I play a lot of games where I'm like, it's pretty clear that the person who made this doesn't really know how to program at all because there's these obvious, really bad programming mistakes in it. And the game would have been 10 times better if they'd just known how to do this one thing. It would have taken them like 2 hours to do this thing or whatever, right? Instead, it's this really bad experience as a result. And so I thought like it was important to put something out there that was like, here is something that shows how to do all the real coding for reals with a Z, so that maybe there'd be more information out there about that. Even when people go to use a pre-made engine or existing code, they know what's going on so they can fix those obvious mistakes that I keep seeing in games all the time now, by people who just use an engine but don't really know how to program. So. Sprite.js file format is completely open and documented. Yeah, exactly. So that's why I was thinking it might be a good one to use if we decide we need animations that are authored. But I think doing procedural animation is more interesting because it's more about code, which is what the series is about. So I feel like we may just want all our animation to be procedural. Do you want to have quests in the game? In this case, how are you planning to define them? Well, that's really more of a thing when you're just building the game. That isn't really an architecture concern to me. At least it doesn't sound like something that would imply much in the architecture that we wouldn't already have. So I don't think we need that to be in our architecture exploration pass, where everything's sort of brought up and running. I don't think that would really have any bearing on it, really. I think we dropped the check for entity equals hit entity in collision code last time, or did I miss something? No, you may be right, because I think I may have forgotten to put it in the place where it should have gone. That's a good point. Let me double check, because I think I said I was going to put it somewhere and then I didn't actually put it somewhere. So when we do this, should collide should have had it in here, and I think we may have forgotten to do that. So yes, you're correct. This should have looked like that. so that we don't waste time checking against itself. So we only want to do collision if A equals, if A is a different entity than B. So that's a good thing. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for catching that. Will you patent the Monstar pathfinding algorithm? Of course. You can't just make an algorithm. You have to patent the algorithm because you're so brilliant that you've come up with this brand new algorithm no one's ever thought of before. You should be the only person who can use it for 17 years. Yeah. I hate patents, in case you didn't know that. I think they're absolutely ridiculous. I have no idea who came up with the idea, but whoever came up with the idea for patents, yeah. An idea that has ruined so many things. For z-axis movement, would it be feasible to resize the sprite to be larger as they move up and then resize the sprite to be smaller once it reaches the level while doing some parallax stuff on the wall textures for the second resize? I don't know. I'm not sure I know exactly what that would look like, what you're saying. I think making the guy get larger would be a little bit wrong because if you think about what's happening here, right? Going upwards is not actually moving you closer to the camera, really. Like that's going upwards, right? And that would not make sense if he got bigger there because it's kind of going like looks like it's sort of perpendicular to the camera as far as the viewer is concerned. So I don't think scaling the guy up would really make sense. If we were straight top down, then I think it would look correct to make the guy get bigger as he went up the stairs. But since we're kind of head on in that sort of Zelda-y style where for some reason, even though you're sort of top down, you're still seeing everyone side on. Who knows how this game convention happened, but that's how we do things in the game world nowadays. I feel like that's probably not what we would want. It's just my guess. Hard to say, though. I think Pokemon 3rd Gen, 1st Gen did good stuff with the Z-axis. What does 3rd Gen / 1st Gen mean? Post a link. If you can, post a link to a video, either on the Handmade Hero forums or on the chat here if you happen to have it handy, so I can look at that because I don't know I don't follow Pokemon super closely. So I don't actually know that one. Will the Monstar encounters be random based like Final Fantasy, Dragon Warrior, or will they be more static Zelda style? Zelda style. So the idea is, you walk around and fight monsters that are actually on the map you're walking around on, not like you kind of touch a sort of representative Monstar and go into a Monstar battle. I was thinking the former, not the latter. Should there be a time limit as well as a distance limit on the sword? Possibly, but that's much more straightforward to implement. That doesn't involve the collision detector or anything, so if we want to add stuff like that later, we can do that. Again, the sword was just an example object. We're not trying to make it good. We're just trying to do some stuff to see what would be necessary in the collision system. So basically, like, I did the movement constraint because it basically put something into the collision architecture. Time constraint would be as simple as during the update call looking how much time was left, which is really easy, right? So I didn't really feel the need to test that, but it'd be pretty easy for us to put in, and I don't think it really has any bearing on things. Minish Cap handles the Z-axis really well. Okay, I'll check out some Minish Cap videos. How exactly does your question sorting plugin work? Basically, it's just anything with a Q colon or C Muratori or Handmade Hero, I think, shows up on my screen. I believe Ultima Online did some stuff with Z-axis, but I'm not sure if it's good though. You know, I saw Ultima Online back in the day. I never really played it myself, but I saw people play it at the Gas Powered Games office, in fact. But I never really played it myself. They probably would have had to do Z stuff though, wouldn't they have? Like, because they had houses, I think, that had like upper, right, like the, you know, upper floors and stuff, and so they had to be able to go upstairs to get things and then downstairs, and so yeah, I should probably take a look. I don't. It might be bad, like you said, but at least I would know. What's the biggest game project you personally worked on? Personally worked on would have to be The Witness, because most of the games that have code in it that I wrote was licensed. So I didn't work on the game directly, right? Like, you know, there are much bigger games that had my character animation system in them when I worked at Rad, but I didn't work on the game. I worked on the character animation system, and then they licensed character animation system for the game. So The Witness is probably the game that I've like worked directly on code that's only for that game, not licensed. That would be the one that's the largest, because that game is huge now. John is not kidding when he says it's big. It is a big game if you choose to try and solve everything. It's not one of those games that forces you to solve everything. But if you choose to tackle all of the problems that it presents to you, all the puzzles, it's huge. No remark on handmade animations, or did I miss that? So I don't consider animations being any more handmade just because they've been made in an art tool. In fact, I consider those less handmade because then there's a tool in between us and the animation. So I feel like if we do procedural animations, that's actually a lot more interesting code-wise and a lot more handmade. Loading animations from a tool is just an import problem. It's like, can you parse a file format? We already showed how to do that with BMPs. So I'm not sure there's really, and we'll do it again with WAV files, at the very least, for the sounds. And then we'll probably, when we get to shipping stuff, we'll have to do compression for our assets because they'll be too big. So we'll have some more of that. So I'm not sure it's interesting to parse another file format. So unless we find we really need to be able to import these animations for some reason, it doesn't seem like an interesting aspect to me. I've been writing my own platform layer in my own code, and I found that I've been poisoned by your approach. I have poisoned somebody. Okay. By this, I've been heading down a path very similar to yours, simply through knowledge of a possible solution to it. This leads me to a very narrow way of thinking about problems. Do you run into this as well? How do you break through the wall? It takes me a very long time to get solutions that fit my needs when I see someone else's. Well, first of all, it's a very good question. I see what you're saying. You don't really mean poisoned in a bad way. You mean, in some sense, you mean biased, I guess. Like, you are biased towards a solution that I have presented because, hey, it's a solution. And now you know a solution. So when you go to do something, you use the solution that you know. And I am definitely not one of those people who believes that I should tell you a solution and then you should go do the solution that I told you. That is definitely not the goal for this stream. The goal for this stream is to show you how to solve problems and to encourage you to solve them in whatever way you feel works best for you. That's totally, that would be my dream scenario of people coming away from the stream not with a prescriptive list of do X, Y, and Z because Casey said so. That is not so interesting, right? What's much more interesting is, oh, we watched how Casey solved these problems. I get how to solve programming problems now. I'm going to go solve my own programming problems in my own way, doing my own stuff. That's way better, right? Because now you can solve problems that I didn't show you how to solve. Now you can solve problems I did show you how to solve, but in different ways, and maybe get better solutions, or at least different solutions. You know, either one is fine, because they kind of increase the options that we have in programming, which is always good, right? More options of how to solve problems is always a good thing, because each one of them probably makes different trade-offs, and then people will be able to pick from different solutions based on the trade-offs. But the question of how you learn to do that, you know, without being biased because, you know, I showed a solution or you read someone else's solution online and go, okay, I should do that. It's tough, right? I try to show as much as possible how I work through things. And I don't know really what to say beyond that's how I do it, right? Is I look at problems, I go, what are the things I want to get out of this? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? What's wrong? You know, one way of setting it up is, what's wrong with my approach, with this current approach, right? Like, look at how I did the platform layer, and instead of thinking about it as a solution, think of just, okay, what is wrong with this? What don't I like about this architecture? What are things that I think are causing problems, or what, you know? If you can't come up with anything, then maybe it's a bad thing to even be spending your time on, right? I mean, maybe it's just fine. But if you can come up with things, then I would say, you know, that's obviously the first step. Come up with some problems you think it has. Once you have those problems, then you can start focusing on what are design changes that would alleviate these problems. How would I code something that didn't have these problems and push towards that? That seems like a pretty sane way to go about it. If you can't come up with problems for an approach that I presented, I think then you're going to be in tough shape in terms of guiding your approach towards making a different solution, because it's hard to make a different solution without having a goal, right? You need a goal. You need to say, here's some stuff Casey's solution didn't do, or things that I didn't like about it, because that's what kind of gives you the metric, the goal, to sort of start iterating towards. It gives you something to work towards, and you kind of need that. It's hard to come up with a different solution strictly by measuring it against whether it's not my solution, right? Or someone else's solution. Because that just is an aimless wander, and you're liable to not really get anywhere interesting if all you want to do is be different. So I think what you want to do is pick different goals, and then achieve those goals and see how achieving those goals changes the solution. That would probably be my recommendation. Excuse me. All right, my voice is going, so we should probably end things shortly. But yeah. Let me see if there's anything else on here. How long do you think a good game should be? I'd say 20 hours is minimal. I guess what I would say is that's a game design question. That's a game design question, and I'm not really qualified to answer it. But what I would say is, I think as a player, I would probably object to the question. Because I don't think games should be about length. I think they should be about the experience. And I think a game should be as long as the experience warrants. I don't think a 20-hour minimum as a definition for a game is good, because I don't think quantity has anything to do with quality. In certain circumstances, it is about quantity. I think Binding of Isaac is good because you can play it for 20, 40, 80 hours, whatever, and it evolves with you. And in some sense, that's sort of where I would like to see this game go as well. I'd like to see this game be a game that's about many playthroughs, So yeah, 20 hours of Handmade Hero play makes sense to me because it's about that kind of thing. But at the same time, if you're talking about an interactive story kind of experience, or if you're talking about, a game that's not about learning gamey systems like that and seeing how they evolve, then 20 hours, why do I want it to take 20 hours? Why do I want length as a thing? When I go to a movie, I don't want the movie to be 20 hours long. I want it to be a nice, good story told in 2 hours, right? Maybe 3. And so I feel like when you're trying to do other things with a game than expose deep Dungeons and Dragons like interaction systems or something, I think that those games don't necessarily want to be super long. If you're playing The Walking Dead or whatever, or whatever those games, like a Telltale game or something like that, I don't think I want that to be 20 hours long. I think I want that to be less than that. I would say that I don't love the question. I think that it should more be about how long should an individual game be. That should be the question. Was this game the right length for the game design? Did this game design have 20 hours worth of good stuff or not? And a lot of times I feel like there are games that do take 20 hours. Like Final Fantasy is a great example of a game that takes 60 hours to play even though there was only 5 hours of gameplay in it, right? Like, I would say that you could condense Final Fantasy X down to 5 hours of awesome gameplay, and instead they spread it out over 70. And that wasn't better, right? I don't think that was better because I played, I did a lot of battles where I did exactly the same thing. And as a player, that's just not that interesting. I want to experience the evolution of those battles, and forcing me to play through 100 of the same battle to get to a point where now it's time to change up my strategy because I got new things and I'm fighting new monsters. I don't think that adds to a game. I think that's basically just wasting the player's time, right? And so I feel like asking that question for every game is a good idea. Does this game's game design actually benefit from this extension of gameplay, or doesn't it? And let's make the game the right size. Because some games should be 20 hours, some games should be 2 hours, and some games should be somewhere in between. Some games should be 80 hours, right? And I think that's the way to ask that question. All right. So let's go ahead and wrap things up. I think we've done a good bit of talking for today. So thank you everyone for joining me for Handmade Hero, kind of wrapping up the week. I think we laid out some good stuff today, so that we kind of went out. We've got a bunch of stuff we can pick from. Monday we can open up that list, pick something from the list, and go to town and kind of start our next aspect of exploration. Which, like I said, I think it's been going pretty well. I like the way things are shaping up in the game so far. We haven't had any real serious things that caused me to kind of go like, we haven't really addressed this thing. So we're kind of getting there. I'm happy about the way things are going. Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic. So I like it. I like what we wrote down on the list. I think all those things are useful things to do, and I think they'll be fun to tackle, and we'll see where it leads us. So as always, if you would like to follow along at home, you can always pre-order the game. It comes with the full source code right now. You can always download the source code. I upload it every time after we finish. So if you'd like to play around with it at home, or if you'd just like to follow along with the code as we code on the stream, that's a good way to do it. You can pre-order it on handmadehero.org. If you'd like to support the video series, we also have a Patreon you can subscribe to. You click on this link for that. And we've got a news and forum site, which is pretty cool. It's got a bunch of resources up there, question and answer boards and stuff like that. It's got ports to Linux, Mac, Android, iOS that community people have done that you can check out. Got a time-coded episode guide, so that's all really good. I highly recommend checking it out. And also, if you want to be kept up to date on the schedule, you can check out our little tweet bot. Subscribe to the tweet bot. We'll tweet the schedule at you so you know if you want to know when the streams are. Yeah. So, thank you very much for joining me. We will be back here again Monday for our last week of coding before break. And so, yeah, next week will be our last coding before we're on break for a week. People have been asking for it, and we give the people what they want. They wanted a break, they'll get a break. So thank you everyone for joining me. Hope to see you back here on Monday. Check out the tweet bot for the schedule. I suspect it'll probably be 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, standard slot on Monday, but if it's not going to be, I will post it. So thanks everyone for joining us, and I will see you next week.